The following is a special presentation for the AAC Outcomes for Kids Research Alliance, given by a project team based at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital in Toronto and Thames Valley Children's Centre in London, Ontario. We are an integrated knowledge translation team with collective experience in AAC, clinical services and education, service administration, research methods and measurement, collaborative practice, and knowledge translation. This presentation is given by 3 project team members. Tracy Shepard is an education coordinator at the Centralized Equipment Pool at Holland Bloorview and a speech-language pathologist in the Augmentative Communication Service at Thames Valley. Steve Ryan is a senior scientist in the Bloorview Research Institute at Holland Bloorview. My name is Anne-Marie Renzoni. I'm also an education coordinator in the Centralized Equipment Pool and an occupational therapist in the Communication and Writing Aids Service at Holland Bloorview. We have 2 main objectives for this presentation. Firstly, we will share key outcomes of our 3-year research study designed to explore the functional impact of AAC interventions for young people with complex communication needs using the Family Impact of Assistive Technology Scale for AAC, or the FIATS-AAC for short. Secondly, we will promote the use of the FIATS-AAC as a clinical tool to understand the multidimensional effects of AAC interventions and improve services for young people with AAC needs and their families. There is much empirical evidence to support that AAC interventions can improve the functional capacity of young people with complex communication needs. We know from high-quality research studies and systematic reviews of original research that AAC can improve communicative competencies in children and youth under controlled conditions. However, we know much less about how AAC impacts what young people actually do at home, at school, and in the community. Knowing more about their functional performance in these settings will give clinicians important clues about how to improve services and outcomes for their clients with AAC needs. We do not know much about functional outcomes, in part because we have few options for measuring them. Within client and family-centered service settings, we need outcome measures that will allow us to learn more about how children and their families function in everyday settings. Steve will now provide a brief review of the FIATS-AAC and its measurement status.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. The FIATS-AAC is a multidimensional parent report questionnaire developed to measure the everyday functioning of young people between the ages of 3 and 18 years who need AAC and their families. The scale has 13 dimensions listed here. 7 dimensions are child-related and 6 dimensions are parent and family-related. The child-related dimensions focus on child functioning and personal factors that may be influenced by the introduction of AAC. The family-related dimensions focus on environmental factors that could influence or be influenced by AAC interventions. The total FIATS-AAC score provides a holistic view of child and family functioning as defined by the scoring of its dimensions. Higher scores in the FIATS-AAC generally relate to higher child and family functioning. Positive change scores in the FIATS-AAC mean improvements or gains in child and family functioning. This is a screenshot of the first page of the FIATS-AAC. The overall scale has 89 items, and each item is assigned to one of 13 dimensions. Parents read the items and rate the degree to which they agree or disagree with an item on a 7-point rating scale. Mean ratings are used to derive scores for each dimension and the total scale. This figure shows the typical development process for new measurement scales in general and the FIATS-AAC in particular. We confirmed the need for a new parent report AAC outcomes measure about 7 years ago after reviewing relevant literature and existing measures. We identified theoretical dimensions and checked their relevance with parents and clinical specialists in the AAC field. We created items for each dimension and checked their clarity with a panel of parents. A series of reliability and validity studies confirmed the consistency of the overall FIATS-AAC and its dimensional scores. We also verified that the scale measures constructs related to child and family functioning. We summarized the scale development and measurement evidence and published the FIATS-AAC questionnaire, its administration manual, and scoring workbook online. As in all measurement development processes, we continue to do other reliability and validity testing to inform the use of the measure. You will learn that our 3-year study provides further evidence supporting the FIATS-AAC as an outcome measure for both clinical and research applications. Okay, so now let's move on to what new information we gleaned from our 3-year study. We designed our study methods to answer the primary research question, does the FIATS-AAC detect functional change in children and their families 3 to 4 months after getting a high-tech graphic-based communication system? Our team chose this as the time interval for change because we expected to see evidence of improved functional performance. If the FIATS-AAC was indeed responsive to change, then we should observe this change in its scoring. To answer our research question, we look for statistically significant change by comparing the difference in mean scores pre- and post-intervention using the FIATS-AAC. We also wanted to get a general sense of how big the change was that we detected. We also asked other questions to provide further support for the validity of the FIATS-AAC. We studied other measurement properties including the scale's reliability, but won't be discussing these findings during this presentation. Instead, we focused on sharing answers to the following 3 secondary questions. Does the FIATS-AAC change when home participation changes for children? Does it also change when we detect changes in family functioning? How much change in the FIATS-AAC is clinically important? To answer the first 2 questions, we compared change in the FIATS-AAC to change detected in 2 standardized measures of home participation and family functioning. For the third question, we estimated how much of a change in the FIATS-AAC would be clinically important by comparing it to a global rating of change in the child's communication since receiving the new AAC system. We recruited 50 parents of children who were receiving AAC services. 30 parents had children who received AAC assessments at Holland Bloorview, and 20 had assessments at Thames Valley Children's Centre. The ages of children who would receive high-tech device were from 3 to 16 years of age. We considered an eligible device to be any speech-generating device that stored more than 1 page of graphic vocabulary. Children could use any method to access their device. 4 interviews were scheduled for parents who consented to participate in the study. Parents took part in T1 and T2 phone interviews with a research team member before the child took a new device home, whereas T3 and T4 phone interviews were held 6 to 8 weeks and 12 to 16 weeks after dispensing the new high-tech device. The AAC services were provided as usual while families were enrolled in the study. Parents completed the FIATS-AAC and other measures at different times during the study. They also completed 3 other measures to answer our secondary questions. The Impact on Family Scale is a parent report measure of the psychosocial functioning of families who have a child with a disability. The Participation and Environment measure for children and youth is a parent report measure of child participation in the home, at school, and in the community, along with environmental factors within each of these settings. However, in our study, we only explored child participation in the home to shorten the phone interviews. We also asked parents to tell us how much of their child's communication changed overall from the time the device was dispensed using a global rating form. The child's AAC clinician completed observational measures at T2, T3, and T4. Each time, the clinician provided ratings for her client's operational, strategic, social, and linguistic competencies. The clinician also provided information about the AAC system and training history. Finally, the clinician independently assigned ratings of change in the child's communication overall, similar to what we asked parents to do at times T3 and T4. Tracy will now tell you more about the parents and children who participated in the study.
45 parents completed phone interviews at T2, T3, and T4. The data collected from these 3 interviews allowed us to answer our research questions. So the results presented going forward are for the 45 participants rather than the 50 families. As you can see, about 85% of participants were mothers. The remaining participants were fathers with 1 grandmother. The distribution of the child's age in years is shown here on this histogram in blue. About 2/3 of the children were younger than 10 years of age. Children were as young as 3 and as old as 16 in our study, and the mean age was just under 8 years old. About 3/4 of the children were boys in our study in terms of gender. This slide shows the number of children by their main diagnosis. So autism spectrum disorder was the most common main diagnosis, followed by cerebral palsy, developmental delay, and you can see the others listed there as well. Clinicians rated their clients' level of communication independence at the time that the device was dispensed. About 80% of children were considered context-dependent communicators by their clinician, while 15 were identified as emerging communicators. Only 1 client was considered an independent communicator. This pentagon plot shows the communication partners and communication methods used by the children in the study as reported by their parents. Around the outside of the Pentagon plot, you can see 5 different types of communication partners, including family members, close friends, paid professionals, other known people, as well as strangers. This plot shows the percentage of children who communicated with the 5 different communication partners using 8 different communication methods. These 8 methods of communication, each represented by a different color, included gestures, sounds or words, speech-generating devices, sign language, communication books or boards, writing and drawing, single message devices, and standard computers. The figure shown here is at the time of dispense of the new equipment, so that's at T2. From this figure, you can see that the 4 most common methods of communication are gestures in dark green, sounds and words in dark orange, and communication books and boards in light green, followed by sign language in blue. We present the same Pentagon plot using parents' responses at 12 to 16 weeks after dispensing the new speech-generating device. So you can see time 4 listed. Both gestures, shown in dark green, and sounds and words in dark orange, remained the most common methods of communication with the different communication partners. However, the new speech-generating device in purple became the 3rd most common method of communication, followed by sign language in blue and communication books and boards in light green. Almost all children use the new speech-generating device with family members and paid professionals, but about 60% used it with close friends and less than 20% with unfamiliar communication partners. The next few slides share the data supplied by AAC clinicians whose young clients were involved in this study. This slide shows the amount and type of training provided for children and youth and their families. The mean number of hours for training from the initial assessment until the 12 to 16 weeks after receiving the new device was about 14 hours. However, you can see there was significant variability in the total hours. With respect to the type of communication training provided, more than 90% of children received operational and linguistic training, 80% received social training, while about 50% received strategic training during the study. Almost all the communication partners, you can see in red, received training on use of the AAC system. This plot shows the mean rating assigned by the clinicians at T2, T3, and T4 for each communication competency as represented by different colors. Individual ratings assigned were from as low as 1, which was poor, to 5, which was excellent on each competency. The 4 lines show a consistent but gradual progression in all clinical competencies on average. The table for these communication competencies at T4 shows that there was much variation in competencies among the individual children. That is, 1 or more children had low competency ratings at T4 after receiving the device 12 to 16 weeks later, whereas others reached the highest levels in all but social communicative competency. This graph shows the number of children who were using a speech-generating device at the time of assessment. So about 80% of the children received their first SGD during the study, whereas the remainder received a replacement device. So the devices replaced for those 8 children are shown here in the top right. This figure shows the types and numbers of the devices dispensed. You can see Apple iPads, PRC Accents, and Tobii Dynavox Series I and T were most commonly dispensed during our study. With respect to vocabulary set, almost 2/3 of the children in our sample used MinSpeak, Picture Word Power, or Word Power.
Thanks, Tracy. The minimum possible score using the FIATS-AAC is 13, and the maximum possible score is 91. At the time of dispensing the AAC device, the minimum score in our study was 36, and the maximum score was 70. The mean was just over 52. These values confirm that all families had the opportunity to show post-intervention change, and the distribution of scores was very similar to the distribution reported in our previous research studies. To answer one of our secondary research questions, we tested whether the FIATS-AAC showed change when we detected change in home participation using the PEMS-CY. The figure on the left is the scoring sheet from the PEMS-CY where 10 common home activities are listed, but it might be a bit tough to read here. Activities listed include indoor play and games, doing arts and crafts and playing music, socializing using technology, getting together with others, doing chores, and personal care activities. The PEMS-CY asked parents to record how often their child participated in each of these activities over the last few months and how involved the child was in the activities done most often. Since the FIATS-AAC measures aspects of child participation, we expected that change in participation on the PEMCY would at least be moderately associated with change shown by the FIATS-AAC. We used a statistic called Pearson's R to estimate the level of this association. You may know that Pearson's R can be a number anywhere from +1, or a perfect positive association, to -1, or a perfect negative association. We found that the FIATS-AAC did align with change in how engaged a child was in home activities. This made sense as we thought that the introduction of AAC interventions would increase a child's involvement in commonly performed home activities. However, we did not find that change in the FIATS-AAC aligned well with change in how often a child did home activities. We're unclear why this was the case, but it does merit further study. We also looked for alignment of change in child and family functioning overall with change in the psychosocial effects of having a child with a disability as measured by the Impact on Family Scale, or IFS for short. Unlike the FIATS-AAC, the negative change in IFS scoring means a gain in family functioning. Therefore, we anticipated a negative and moderate association between measured change in the FIATS-AAC and IFS scores using Pearson's R. Our prediction was pretty good. We found that gains in the FIATS-AAC align moderately with gains in family functioning detected by the IFS. This finding provides further support for the validity of the FIATS-AAC. Now, onto our primary research question. We want to know whether the FIATS-AAC showed functional change 12 to 16 weeks after children and youth received an AAC device. If so, we also want to know more about how big a change we found. Our test shows statistically significant gains in child and family functioning as measured by the FIATS-AAC. Before we started the study, we predicted that the size of the effect would be greater than or equal to 0.5. This effect translates into a moderate change in child and family functioning. Our analyses showed a slightly smaller effect size than this. The 0.38 value we measured was considered to be a small gain in child and family functioning overall. Regardless, this is an important finding as it shows that the FIATS-AAC detects change when we expect change to occur. However, we needed to consider other data we collected to figure out how much change is needed to be clinically important. I'll return to this point a little bit later. As part of an exploratory analysis, we wanted to know how the 13 dimensions of the FIATS-AAC contributed to gains measured by the FIATS-AAC overall. This figure shows the estimated effect sizes for each dimension of the FIATS-AAC. Darker blue lines corresponded to parent and family-related effects, whereas the lighter blue lines corresponded to child-related effects 12 to 16 weeks after the child received the new AAC device. Lines to the right of the zero were gains, and the line to the left of the zero is a loss in functioning. This suggests that all but one dimension shows gains during the study period. However, effect sizes below 0.2 using this metric could be considered to be trivial gains or losses. So let's consider only those dimensions that are greater than 0.2. We found small to moderate effect sizes in 6 dimensions as shown by the shaded area of the graph. For a child with AAC needs, these improvements related to independence, face-to-face communication, behavior, and school success. For the parent dimensions, the effect sizes suggest parents in general were less worried about their child's safety and had higher energy levels months after their child received the new AAC system. While these findings are interesting, we need to do further research using different methods and larger samples to understand more about the relationships between the changes in these dimensions and specific AAC interventions. Lastly, we looked at how change in the FIATS-AAC scores related to global ratings assigned by both parents and clinicians. We used these relationships to get an estimate of clinically important change. Parents responded to the following question 12 to 16 weeks after their child took the speech-generating device home. Overall, how would you say your child's communication is today compared with the day when he or she first received the new AAC device? Parents rated their child's change in communication overall using a 15-point scale. Each clinician used the same scale to measure a rating for the same child. The assigned score could be as high as +7 or a great deal better to as low as -7 or a great deal worse. A rating of 0 meant no change in the child's communication overall. Each clinician used the same scale to assign a rating for the same child. This table shows the descriptive statistics for global ratings assigned by both parents and clinicians. The lowest score assigned by a parent was 0, or no change in communication overall, whereas the lowest score assigned by a clinician was -5, suggesting that the child's communication worsened after getting the high-tech device. The mean ratings infer that parents overall rated the communication of their children improved slightly more than clinicians believed. Interestingly, we found no significant association between parents and clinicians' ratings using Pearson's R. However, we want to note that more than 8 out of 10 paired ratings were within 3 points of each other. This figure is a scatter plot that shows the global ratings assigned by parents along the vertical axis versus the change in FIATS-AAC scores along the horizontal axis. Each diamond corresponds to paired ratings for one parent participant. We found that a positive change of at least 2.5 points on the total FIATS-AAC, as shown by the vertical blue line, corresponded to a global rating change by parents of positive 3 or higher in 21 out of 21 cases. This is the same scatter plot shown with blue dots superimposed on 7 cases. These blue dots corresponded to those cases where the child's clinician reported no gains in functional communication at T4 or 12 to 16 weeks after the child received the AAC device. You can see that for FIATS-AAC change scores greater than 2.5, that's to the right of the blue vertical line, clinicians agreed that children showed some improvement in communication in all but one of these 21 cases. All research studies have limitations that are important to consider when deciding how the findings may apply to a specific clinical situation. First, our sample of parents was diverse. This was a random sample of the population of young people with complex communication needs. It was a convenience sample taken from 2 large AAC services based in 2 Ontario cities. Consequently, the sample may not be representative of ours or other AAC services. While we showed that the FIATS-AAC could detect functional change, we did not have a control group, so we cannot be certain that the functional gains were due to the AAC intervention. This change could be due to child development, though this is less defensible given the short time intervals we had in our study. However, it could be due to other factors that we didn't measure. We purposely used all of the data that we collected to answer our research questions. However, we note that variation occurred in the technologies provided, the type and amount of clinical training provided, and time between intervals. These also likely influenced our results, so the gains detected could be greater or less than what we measured if these factors were more controlled. We can make a few summary observations that provide further support for the FIATS-AAC as a parent report measure of functional performance. First, sensitivity to change is an important characteristic to consider when deciding whether or not to adopt an outcome measure for either research or clinical purposes. We showed that the FIATS-AAC is sensitive to change in child and family functioning following an AAC intervention. Second, we estimated how much change in the FIATS-AAC would be considered an important functional difference overall. This is important because it adds further to our understanding and interpretation of the effectiveness of an AAC intervention. Lastly, we showed that the FIATS-AAC measures constructs related to change in home participation engagement and family functioning. These findings relate to the validity of the measure, and again, this adds value to our understanding of how the FIATS-AAC change predicts change in key aspects of the lives of children and their families. Overall, our study results provide more reasons to like the FIATS-AAC as an outcome measure for children and youth with AAC needs.
You can learn more about the FIATS-AAC and its clinical application by visiting an online innovation repository called Flintbox. The FIATS-AAC questionnaire, its administration manual, and Excel scoring workbook are available at no cost on this site. You need to register on Flintbox and accept the standard licensing agreement to get access to the FIATS-AAC offerings. The advantage of registering on this site is that we will notify you of updates to these offerings as we learn more about the measurement properties of the FIATS-AAC. We wish to acknowledge the parents and children who participated in our study. We also wish to thank the AAC clinic staff at Holland Bloorview and Thames Valley who were key knowledge user members of our project team. We are grateful for the partnership support received from the following organizations. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. Please contact us if you have questions or would like further information about the clinical applications for the FIATS-AAC or results of our 3-year study.